The year is 1820. The sun has long since set over the rugged, mist-covered hills of a small village in Wales. The wind whistles through the cracks of old stone cottages, and the only light comes from a few flickering candles in a window. Inside one of those homes, a family is gathered in silence. They are mourning a loved one who has just passed away. But as they weep, they are also waiting. They are waiting for a knock on the door that most people would find terrifying. Suddenly, a soft thud echoes through the room. The door creaks open, and a man steps out of the darkness. He is dressed in rags, his face lined with years of hardship. He does not say a word. He does not offer his condolences, and he does not join the family in prayer. Instead, he walks straight to the center of the room, where a simple meal has been placed. He is here to perform a task that no one else in the village would ever dare to do. He is here to take something that cannot be seen, touched, or measured. This man is a sin-eater. By the time the sun rises, he will have taken upon himself the weight of all the bad deeds committed by the person who died. He will walk back into the night, carrying a burden that the villagers believe would otherwise keep a soul from finding peace. But who was this man? Why would anyone agree to take on the sins of a stranger? As we pull back the curtain on this hidden chapter of history, we find a story that is as heartbreaking as it is mysterious. To understand the sin-eater, we have to look at the beliefs of the time. Hundreds of years ago, in parts of Britain, Scotland, and Wales, people were deeply concerned about what happened after death. They believed that if a person died suddenly, or if they had done many bad things during their life, their soul would be heavy. This heaviness, they thought, would prevent the person from entering heaven. The sin-eater was a person, usually a very poor man, who was hired to solve this problem. He was a professional, but not the kind we think of today. He wasn't a doctor or a lawyer. He was a spiritual worker who operated on the edges of society. His job was simple but profound. Through a specific ritual involving food and drink, he would absorb the sins of the deceased into his own body. In the eyes of the villagers, this made him a hero and a monster at the same time. He was a hero because he saved the dead from a dark fate. But he was also a monster because, with every ritual he performed, he became darker himself. People believed his own soul was becoming more and more burdened with the weight of hundreds of different people's mistakes. Because of this, the sin-eater was a man who lived a life of extreme isolation. But as we look closer, we realize that the food he ate was not just a meal, it was a social contract that kept him alive while keeping him alone. Where does such a strange idea come from? History tells us that the practice of sin-eating didn't just appear overnight. It was a mixture of many different things. Some historians believe it started as a very old folk tradition that predates modern religious practices. Others think it was a way for people to cope with the fear of unconfessed sins. Back then, life was dangerous. A person could be healthy in the morning and gone by the evening. If someone died before they could ask for forgiveness for their mistakes, their family felt a deep sense of panic. They needed a safety net. The sin-eater became that safety net. The practice became most common in the 17th and 18th centuries, especially in rural areas where the official church was far away. In these remote villages, old traditions stayed alive much longer than in big cities. The sin-eater was a figure of the wilderness, a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the spirit. But why did the community decide that eating food was the way to transfer a soul's debt? The answer lies in the ancient connection between bread and life itself. The actual ritual was a very quiet and somber event. It followed a specific pattern that rarely changed. Once a person passed away, the family would prepare a piece of bread and a bowl of ale or water. This food was placed directly on the chest of the deceased person. The family believed that as the bread sat there, it would act like a sponge, soaking up the sins of the person lying beneath it. When the sin-eater arrived, he would stand over the body. He would take the bread and eat it in front of the family. Then he would drink the ale. Finally, he would say a short prayer or a ritualistic phrase, often something like, "I give pawn and surrender for thee. I give my soul for thine." In that moment, the exchange was considered complete. The debt was moved from the dead to the living. Immediately after eating, the sin-eater was often chased out of the house. In some villages, people would even throw sticks or stones at him as he left. It wasn't because they hated him for what he did. It was because they were afraid of the sins he now carried. They wanted that energy away from their home as quickly as possible. He would disappear back into the woods or his small shack, alone with his thoughts and his new burden. But what could drive a person to accept such a lonely existence? The identity of the Sin Eater tells us a lot about the social structure of the time. You would never find a wealthy man or a successful merchant performing this ritual. The job was always reserved for the lowest of the low, the forgotten people of the village. These were often men who had no land, no family, and no other way to survive. For the Sin Eater, the pay was usually very small, perhaps a few copper coins and a meal. But in a time of great hunger, a guaranteed meal was worth a lot. These men chose to sacrifice their spiritual reputation so they could survive another day on earth. It was a choice between starving with a clean soul or living with a heavy one. This created a very sad dynamic. The wealthy families in the village would look down on the Sin Eater, treating him like an outcast, yet they were the first ones to call him when a family member died. They used his poverty to buy their own peace of mind. It was a trade. The poor man took the guilt, and the rich man took the comfort. This makes us wonder who was really carrying the weight of the village. To understand why this lasted so long, we have to understand how people viewed the world. In the 1700s, people didn't see sins as just ideas or words. They saw them as almost physical things like a layer of dust or dirt on the soul. If you didn't wash it off, it stayed there forever. The Sin Eater was like a spiritual trash collector. He took what no one else wanted so the community could stay clean. There was also a strong belief in ghosts. People thought that a soul burdened with sins would wander the village, causing bad luck, crop failure, or illness. By hiring a Sin Eater, the village was protecting itself. The Sin Eater was the ultimate scapegoat. A scapegoat is someone who is blamed for the mistakes of others so that everyone else can feel better. By having one man carry all the darkness, the rest of the village could live in the light. But the cost for that one man was higher than any amount of money could cover. He lost his place in the human circle. He became a shadow that moved among the living. While much of this history was passed down by word of mouth, there are some written records that prove these men existed. One of the most famous accounts comes from a man named John Aubrey, a writer in the 1600s. He described a Sin Eater as a long, lean, ugly, lamentable, poor rascal. His description shows how much the public disrespected these men, even as they relied on them. There is also the story of Richard Munslow, who died in 1906. He is often called the last Sin Eater of England. Interestingly, Richard was not a poor man. He was a successful farmer. History suggests he became a Sin Eater after a great tragedy in his own family. He didn't do it for the money or the bread. He did it out of a deep sense of grief and a desire to help his neighbors find the peace that he couldn't find himself. These stories show us that while the ritual was often about survival, it was also about the deep human need for hope. Even in the darkest times, people wanted to believe that someone, somewhere, could take their pain away. But as the world began to modernize, the shadow of the Sin Eater began to shrink. As we moved into the late 1800s and early 1900s, the world changed. Science and medicine began to explain things that used to be seen as magic or spirits. Education became more common, and the old folk ways started to seem like superstitions. The church also began to work harder to stop these rituals, calling them unchristian and backwards. The arrival of the Industrial Revolution meant that people moved from small, isolated villages to big, crowded cities. In a city, you didn't know your neighbors, and the old village traditions didn't fit anymore. The Sin Eater was a figure of the countryside, of the hills and the mist. In the bright light of the modern world, he simply faded away. But even though the ritual stopped, the feeling behind it didn't. We still look for ways to deal with our mistakes. We still look for ways to forgive ourselves. The Sin Eater disappeared, but the human hunger for peace remained as strong as ever. What does the story of the Sin Eater really tell us? It tells us that humans are willing to go to great lengths to avoid facing their own fears. We create systems and traditions to help us handle the things we don't understand. The Sin Eater was a symbol of our desire to delegate our problems to someone else. It also tells us about how we treat the most vulnerable people in our society. The Sin Eater was needed, but he was not loved. He was useful, but he was not respected. This is a pattern we see throughout history. The people who do the most difficult or dirty work for a society are often the ones the society treats the worst. The ritual of eating bread off a deceased person's chest seems strange to us now. But if we look at it through the lens of history, it was a way for a community to show that they cared about each other's souls. It was a dark, heavy kind of love. It was a way of saying, "Your mistakes will not be the end of you. We will find a way to carry you home." The Sin Eaters have long since walked into the final sunset, leaving behind only whispers in old history books. Today, we don't hire people to eat our sins. We have different ways of dealing with guilt and responsibility. But the core of the story remains. We are all looking for a way to be light again. The Sin Eater reminds us to look at the forgotten people in our own world. It reminds us that every person we see has a burden they are carrying, even if it's invisible. History is a mirror that shows us where we've been and how much we've grown. When we look at the Sin Eater, we see a world that was scared, but also a world that believed in the possibility of being forgiven. If you enjoy learning about these hidden and mysterious chapters of our past, please consider subscribing for more journeys into history. There is always another story waiting in the shadows. Thank you for watching, and remember, history is not just about what happened. It's about who we became because of it.